Imagine waking up as a young noble in the year 12,048, the cold stone floor of Warwick Castle beneath your feet, knowing that your path to knighthood will consume the next decade of your life. The romanticized tales of chivalrous knights rescuing fair maidens have poisoned your understanding of what truly awaits you. You are William of Ashford, 12 years old, second son of a minor baron, and today marks the beginning of your journey into a world where honor is bought with blood, where your 60-pound armor will become both your protection and your prison, where the politics of court prove deadlier than any battlefield. The morning bell tolls, and you realize that from this moment forward, every dawn brings new opportunities for death, disgrace, or dismemberment. Your childhood has ended, replaced by a brutal apprenticeship where failure means not just disappointment, but potentially the ruin of your entire family line. The weight of expectation sits heavier than any armor ever could. In the Great Hall, you can already hear the clash of training swords, the grunts of pain from older pages who've learned that knightly combat bears no resemblance to the graceful duels of troubadour songs. This is your reality now, a world where dysentery kills more warriors than swords, where your romantic ideals will be ground to dust beneath the heel of feudal obligation, and where the code of chivalry serves more as a chain than a guide to noble behavior. Before diving into these forgotten realities of medieval knighthood, where honor came at the price of humanity itself, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history that strip away romantic myths to reveal brutal realities, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these harsh medieval truths together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared fascination with how our ancestors truly lived, suffered, and survived in times we've romanticized beyond recognition. You stand in the Great Hall of Warwick Castle, your 12-year-old frame dwarfed by the massive stone columns that stretch toward the vaulted ceiling 40 feet above. The year is 1248, and King Henry III rules England with an increasingly unstable hand. Your father, Baron Edmund of Ashford, grips your shoulder with calloused fingers that have wielded swords in countless battles. His grip tightens as Lord Robert de Beaumont approaches, the man who will transform you from a minor noble's son into either a knight or a corpse. The contract of your page service is being negotiated in hushed tones that nevertheless echo through the cavernous space. 7 years of servitude, your father promises, in exchange for training, armor, and the possibility of knighthood. You watch as your father hands over a purse containing 30 silver marks, nearly half your family's annual income, just for the privilege of having you beaten, bruised, and molded into something useful to the feudal machine. Around you, other pages scurry about their duties, their faces marked with exhaustion and resignation. One boy, perhaps 14, limps past carrying a chamber pot, his fine clothes from 2 years ago, now patched and stained beyond recognition. This is your future self, you realize with growing dread. The romantic tales never mentioned the chamber pots, the pre-dawn wake-ups, or the way noble birth means nothing when you're scrubbing rust from chainmail with sand and vinegar until your fingers bleed. Lord de Beaumont finally turns his attention to you, his eyes as cold as the January wind that howls through the arrow slits. He asks if you understand Latin, can ride a horse, know your prayers. Your affirmative answers seem to neither please nor displease him. You are simply another resource to be exploited, another young body to throw into the machinery of war. Your first night in the pages' quarters teaches you that nobility means nothing when 8 boys share a room designed for 4. The straw mattress beneath you crawls with lice that will become your constant companions for years to come. Thomas, a page of 3 years, explains the hierarchy while picking at a festering wound on his shin that refuses to heal in the damp castle environment. You are lowest, he says, which means you wake first, eat last, and suffer most. The bell for matins rings at 3 in the morning, and you stumble from your pallet in complete darkness. Your fingers, numb with cold, fumble with the laces of your hose as Thomas hisses at you to hurry. The chapel is a 5-minute walk through corridors so cold your breath forms clouds, and arriving late means a beating that will leave you unable to sit properly for days. In the chapel, you kneel on stone that feels like ice through your thin clothing. The Latin prayers drone on for an hour while your knees go numb, then begin to burn with pain. You dare not shift position. Brother Francis carries a rod specifically for boys who show weakness during prayer. 2 seats away, a page named Geoffrey sways dangerously, exhausted from being kept up all night polishing Lord de Beaumont's armour for an inspection that never came. After prayers, you report to the kitchens where your actual education begins, learning to carve meat properly for your lord's table. The cook, a massive woman named Marjorie with arms like ham hocks, demonstrates on a cold roasted capon. Your frozen fingers can barely grip the knife properly, and when you inevitably cut incorrectly, she wraps your knuckles with a wooden spoon, hard enough to raise welts that will last a week. The training yard becomes your first taste of genuine medieval combat, and it tastes like blood and dirt. Master-at-Arms Sir Godwin, a scarred veteran of the Barons' War, believes pain is the only teacher worth having. Your wooden training sword weighs 8 pounds, designed to build the strength needed to wield real steel for hours. Within minutes, your arms burn like fire, and Sir Godwin hasn't even begun the actual lesson. You're paired with Richard, a page 2 years your senior, who delights in demonstrating the vast gulf between your abilities. His first blow catches you across the ribs, driving the air from your lungs and dropping you to your knees in the mud. Sir Godwin's response is to kick you in the stomach for showing weakness. Your enemy won't wait for you to catch your breath, he growls, forcing you back to your feet with the point of his own practice sword. The morning drags on in a blur of pain and humiliation. You learn that footwork matters more than strength, but only after Richard sweeps your legs a dozen times. You discover that medieval combat is nothing like the stories. It's dirty, brutal, and exhausting. When Richard finally breaks your nose with a thrust that slips past your guard, the blood streaming down your face merely earns you a nod of approval from Sir Godwin. Blood means you're learning, he says, before ordering you to continue. By noon, you can barely lift your arms. Your body is a map of bruises that will turn purple, then green, then yellow, over the coming weeks. The other pages regard your battered state with indifference. They all went through this, and many sport permanent reminders. Thomas is missing 2 teeth, Geoffrey's left ear is cauliflowered, and even the senior pages bear scars from training accidents that weren't really accidents. Your education in reading and writing begins in the castle's drafty scriptorium, where Brother Francis wields his birch rod with the same enthusiasm Sir Godwin shows for his practice swords. Latin is the language of the educated, he reminds you with each stroke across your palms when you stumble over conjugations. Your hands, already raw from sword practice, split open as the rod falls again and again. The other pages scratch away at their wax tablets, copying passages from religious texts until their fingers cramp. You learn that medieval literacy is a luxury even among nobles, and Lord de Beaumont expects his future knights to read contracts, write dispatches, and understand legal documents. This practical education comes at the cost of countless hours hunched over poor quality parchment, squinting in candlelight that ruins your eyes before you reach 20. Brother Francis assigns you to copy the Rule of the Templars, a mind-numbing task that takes weeks. Each mistake means starting the entire page over, wasting precious parchment that costs more than a peasant earns in a month. Your back aches constantly from the unnatural position, bent over the writing desk for hours. The ink stains your fingers permanently black, marking you as somewhat educated, but also as someone still too junior to have a scribe do this work for them. During a brief respite, Thomas about the page who came before you, a boy named Walter, who made the mistake of spilling ink on an important document. Lord de Beaumont had him whipped in the courtyard, 20 lashes that left scars still visible when he was sent home in disgrace. His family's shame was so complete that his younger brother was refused fosterage anywhere in the county. One careless moment, Thomas warns, and 7 years of suffering become meaningless. The Feast of St. George introduces you to the political battlefield of the Great Hall, where words cut deeper than swords and alliances shift with each course. As the newest page, you're assigned to serve Lord de Beaumont's important guests, carrying ewers of wine that weigh nearly as much as you do. One stumble, one spilled drop on a noble's expensive clothing, and the consequences would make your training yard beatings seem like gentle corrections. You watch the senior pages navigate this dangerous dance with practiced ease. They know which lords require their wine watered, which ladies expect their meat cut into delicate portions, and most importantly, which conversations to pretend not to hear. Geoffrey whispers that last month a page from Worcester was sent home missing an ear for repeating something he overheard about the king's failed campaigns in France. Lord de Beaumont hosts Sir Hugh Despenser, a man whose cruelty is legendary, even among nobles accustomed to violence. When you approach to refill his goblet, his hand shoots out, grabbing your wrist with enough force to grind the bones together. He examines your family's coat of arms on your tunic with contempt. Ashford, he sneers. Your father backed the wrong side at Lewes. Remember that, boy. The threat is clear. Your family's past allegiances make you vulnerable. The feast continues for 6 hours, and you remain on your feet throughout, your arms trembling from the weight of the serving vessels. You observe the casual cruelty of the nobility, watching them throw perfectly good food to the dogs, while knowing the servants will go to bed hungry. The extravagance is deliberate, a display of power that costs more than your father's entire annual income. This is the world you're being trained to enter, where waste is a weapon and generosity is weakness. Your introduction to armor comes not as its wearer, but as its servant. Sir Godwin's chainmail weighs 40 pounds and requires constant maintenance to prevent rust in England's damp climate. You spend entire days with sand, vinegar, and raw fingers, scrubbing each individual ring, while your skin cracks and bleeds. The accumulated rust and dirt create a reddish-brown sludge that stains everything it touches, marking you as the lowest form of military servant. Thomas teaches you the arduous process of properly dressing a knight for battle, a ritual that takes nearly an hour and cannot afford a single mistake. First comes the padded gambeson, thick enough to prevent the chainmail from grinding flesh raw. Then the mail itself, requiring 2 people to lift over the knight's head without tangling. The coif, the gauntlets, the surcoat. Each piece has a specific order, and forgetting one could mean your lord's death and your execution for negligence. You learn that armor is paradoxically both protection and vulnerability. Knights who fall in battle often drown in mere inches of mud, unable to right themselves in 60 pounds of metal. During summer campaigns, men cook alive in their armor, and you'll be expected to constantly pour water through their visors to prevent heat death. In winter, the metal becomes so cold it can freeze to exposed skin, tearing flesh when removed. The real revelation comes when Sir Godwin allows you to wear a chainmail haubergeon during training. The weight immediately drags at your shoulders, and within minutes, you're gasping for breath. Your movements become sluggish, clumsy. Richard, unarmored, dances around you with ease, landing blow after blow while you flail helplessly. Strained. This is the reality of armored combat. It's not about strength or skill, but about endurance and the ability to remain functional while your body screams for relief. The stables reveal another brutal reality of knighthood. Without horses, knights are merely expensive infantry. Your education in horsemanship begins with mucking stalls before dawn, a task that leaves you reeking of manure, no matter how thoroughly you wash. The war horses, or destriers, are worth more than most knights' entire estates, and they know it. These aren't the gentle palfreys of romantic tales, but aggressive beasts trained to bite, kick, and trample enemies. Master of Horse, a grizzled Welshman named Rhys, assigns you to Thunder, a destrier with a reputation for killing 2 previous grooms. Your first approach results in nearly losing your fingers to his yellow teeth. Rhys laughs, explaining that war horses are trained to be weapons themselves. You'll spend months earning Thunder's tolerance, not trust. These horses trust no one completely. You learn that riding a destrier requires strength most grown men don't possess. The high-backed war saddle forces an unnatural position that tears your thigh muscles and leaves you unable to walk properly for days. Controlling the horse while wearing armor and wielding weapons seems impossible. During your first mounted combat lesson, you last exactly 3 seconds before Thunder's sudden turn sends you crashing to the ground, your shoulder dislocating with a wet pop that makes even hardened pages wince. The stable boys, mostly common-born, watch your struggles with barely concealed satisfaction. They know the truth you're learning. Most knights die from horse-related injuries, not enemy swords. A spooked horse, a broken girth strap, a moment's inattention, any could mean death or permanent maiming. You witness this firsthand when a visiting knight's destrier tramples a stable boy who moved too quickly. The boy survives, but will never walk again. The knight's only concern is whether his horse injured a hoof. Your first taste of actual warfare comes not through glorious battle, but through its aftermath. Lord de Beaumont rides out to suppress a peasant uprising in Northamptonshire, taking his senior squires and pages to blood them. You expect heroic combat. Instead, you find burning villages and screaming civilians. The peasants, armed with farming tools and righteous anger over excessive taxes, never stood a chance against mounted knights. You're tasked with guarding prisoners while the knights debate their fate. These aren't foreign enemies, but English farmers. Their hands calloused from the same work that feeds the castle. A man your father's age begs you for water, his jaw broken by a mace blow. When you move to help him, Sir Godwin strikes you, hard enough to send you sprawling. They're rebels, he says simply, as if that explains everything. The executions begin at dawn. As a page, you're required to watch and assist, holding horses while the knights hang the uprising's leaders. One by one, farmers who dared demand fair treatment dance at rope's end, while their families wail. A boy no older than yourself spits at Lord de Beaumont before the noose goes around his neck. His courage in the face of death shames your noble birth, but you dare not show it. The ride back to Warwick Castle is silent except for the clink of looted goods. Your saddlebags carry confiscated grain that will feed the castle through winter, while the surviving villagers starve. This is chivalry's true face, protecting the interests of the powerful by crushing the powerless. The songs never mention the children crying over their fathers' bodies, or the smoke from burning homes that follows you for miles. Winter in Warwick Castle brings a different kind of warfare. The battle against cold, disease and despair. The pages' quarters, barely tolerable in summer, become a frozen hell where water left in cups turns to ice overnight. You sleep fully clothed, huddled with the other boys for warmth like animals, dignity abandoned for survival. Thomas develops a wet cough that keeps everyone awake and will eventually fill his lungs with fluid. The training continues regardless of weather. Sir Godwin believes that enemies don't rest for snow, so neither should you. Your wooden sword becomes slippery with ice, flying from numb fingers to earn you punishment laps around the courtyard. Your feet, wrapped in cloth within your boots, still develop frostbite that turns 2 toes black. The castle physician, more butcher than healer, suggests amputation, but you refuse, preferring the risk of blood poisoning to the certainty of lameness. Food becomes scarce as winter deepens. The grand feasts continue for the nobles, but pages survive on gruel, stale bread, and whatever scraps they can steal. You learn to catch and eat rats, a skill Thomas teaches with disturbing expertise. The meat is stringy and tastes of disease, but it fills the gnawing emptiness in your belly. When Geoffrey falls ill from eating spoiled meat, you take his portions without guilt. Sentiment is a luxury the weak can't afford. The worst comes when the flux spreads through the castle. What starts as stomach cramps becomes bloody diarrhea that kills 3 pages within a week. You watch boys you've trained beside waste away to nothing, their bodies thrown into lime pits because the ground is too frozen for proper burial. The nobles retreat to warmer quarters, leaving you to tend the sick and dying. This is how most knights actually die, not in glorious battle, but shitting themselves to death in drafty castles. Spring brings the tournament season, where you learn that chivalric competitions are merely war with prettier decorations. Lord de Beaumont enters the great tournament at Kenilworth, bringing his entire household to display his wealth and power. As a page, you're responsible for maintaining his equipment and ensuring his horses are ready for the brutal spectacle that masquerades as noble sport. The reality of tournaments destroys any romantic notions immediately. Knights don't compete for honor or ladies' favors, but for ransom money and horseflesh. A defeated knight forfeits his armor and horse to the victor, potentially ruining his family financially. You watch minor nobles risk everything they own for the chance to capture a wealthier opponent. It's barely disguised warfare, where political enemies can legally murder each other. Your duties include retrieving Lord de Beaumont's lances after each charge, often while combat continues around you. During the melee, where dozens of knights fight simultaneously, you dodge hooves and maces to drag wounded men from the field. The physician's tent becomes a charnel house of broken bones and split skulls. A knight from Lincolnshire takes a lance through his eye, the point emerging from the back of his helmet. He lives for 3 days, screaming until his voice gives out. The tournament's grand finale sees Lord de Beaumont face Sir Despencer in single combat. What appears to be a chivalrous duel is actually attempted murder, as Sir Despencer aims every blow at weak points in Lord de Beaumont's armor. When your lord finally triumphs, breaking 3 of Sir Despencer's ribs, you understand this victory has made a permanent enemy. The politics of tournaments are deadlier than the combat itself, creating vendettas that span generations. Your education in castle defence begins when word arrives of Scottish raiders approaching the northern estates. Lord de Beaumont transforms Warwick Castle into a military camp, and you learn that sieges are won not through heroic battles but through starvation, disease, and psychological warfare. The romantic notion of castle life dies as you help prepare for the ugly reality of siege warfare. You're assigned to help fill the castle's cisterns, hauling water from the well until your back threatens to break. Every drop matters during a siege, when enemies poison water sources or simply wait for defenders to die of thirst. The castle's stores are inventoried obsessively. Grain, salt, meat, dried fish, and barrels of ale that will become more precious than gold if the Scots arrive. You learn to calculate how many days the castle can survive with its current population, a grim arithmetic that assumes casualties will extend supplies. The murder holes above the main gate become your station during drills. Through these openings, you'll pour boiling oil, quicklime, or human waste on attackers. The senior pages demonstrate with water, but the principle remains horrifying. Medieval defense relies on causing maximum agony to discourage assault. You practice loading the castle's crossbows, weapons so powerful they're banned by the church for use against Christians, though this rule is universally ignored. Master Mason shows you the castle's weaknesses, knowledge that could earn you execution if shared. Every fortress has vulnerable points where sappers could undermine walls, or where trebuchet stones would cause maximum damage. This information is power, carefully guarded, and worth more than gold to enemies. You realize that most successful sieges end not through assault, but through betrayal, when someone inside sells these secrets for survival or profit. The Scottish threat passes without reaching Warwick, but Lord de Beaumont decides you need experience with actual combat medicine. The castle's barber surgeon, Master Benedict, takes you as an assistant, introducing you to the grotesque reality of medieval healing. His workshop reeks of blood, pus, and the sickly sweet smell of gangrene that will forever haunt your dreams. Your first lesson involves holding down a squire while Master Benedict saws through his shattered leg bone. The boy's screams echo off the stone walls, despite the leather strap between his teeth. There's no effective anesthesia except massive quantities of alcohol, which thin the blood and often kill patients through hemorrhage. You learn to ignore screams, to view suffering bodies as problems to solve, rather than people to pity. The medical knowledge available is actively harmful more often than helpful. Master Benedict believes in the four humours, treating everything from fever to madness by draining blood. You watch him drill holes in a page's skull to release evil vapours causing headaches. The boy survives but never speaks coherently again. Wounds are packed with dirty cobwebs to stop bleeding, introducing infections that kill more surely than the original injury. You assist with treating a knight whose intestines spill from a sword wound. Master Benedict stuffs them back inside like sausage filling, stitches the skin with horsehair, and declares God will decide the outcome. The knight dies 3 days later, his belly swollen with infection, screaming about demons eating him from within. This is medieval medicine, butchery disguised as healing, where survival depends more on constitution than treatment. You realize that avoiding injury isn't just preferable, but essential, as medical treatment often hastens death, rather than preventing it. Your 4th year begins with advancement to senior page, bringing new responsibilities and crueler lessons. You're now trusted to attend Lord de Beaumont during private meetings, where the true business of nobility unfolds. These chambers witness conspiracies that would see men hanged for treason if spoken in public. You stand silent in shadows, learning that honor is a luxury reserved for public display, while real power flows through blackmail, assassination, and betrayal. Lord de Beaumont meets with wool merchants who finance his military ambitions in exchange for protection from rival guilds. You watch him sign documents condemning debtors to prison, knowing their families will starve. When a merchant questions the harsh terms, Lord de Beaumont casually mentions the man's daughter, unmarried and vulnerable. The threat needs no elaboration. The merchant signs with trembling hands. This is how noble power truly works, through fear dressed as law. A message arrives from the king, demanding troops for another failed campaign in Wales. Lord de Beaumont openly mocks Henry III's weakness, while calculating how few men he can send without being accused of treason. You help forge muster rolls, inflating numbers with dead men's names and fictional soldiers. Every noble in England plays this game, sending just enough support to avoid punishment, while preserving their real strength for inevitable civil conflicts. The most damning lesson comes when Lord de Beaumont orders the murder of a rival's messenger. You watch Sir Godwin strangle the man with practiced efficiency, then help dress the scene as a robbery. The message the courier carried is burned unread. Its contents matter less than the disruption its loss will cause. You dispose of the body in the castle's waste pit, understanding that you're now complicit in murder. This knowledge chains you to Lord de Beaumont more surely than any oath. The Feast of St. Michael brings your first experience with courtly love's ugly reality. Lady Eleanor, Lord de Beaumont's young wife, selects you as her personal page for the festivities. This honor actually means becoming a pawn in the dangerous game of adultery that defines noble marriages. You carry secret messages to Sir William Marshal, her lover, while Lord de Beaumont pretends not to notice for political reasons. The hypocrisy is suffocating. In public, Lady Eleanor embodies chivalric virtue, distributing alms and praising God. In private, she conducts an affair that would see a common woman burned as an adulteress. You stand guard while she and Sir William couple in the chapel, their passion defiling sacred ground. When she emerges, disheveled and flushed, she hands you a gold coin, your payment for enabling mortal sin. Lord de Beaumont knows, of course. He discusses it openly with Sir Godwin while you serve wine, calculating when to reveal his knowledge for maximum political advantage. Lady Eleanor's father controls 3 castles Lord de Beaumont covets. The affair is leverage, carefully preserved until the moment it becomes more valuable to expose than conceal. Their marriage is pure politics, their son merely an heir to secure alliances. You observe how noble women are simultaneously powerful and powerless. Lady Eleanor commands dozens of servants and considerable wealth. Yet she was sold to Lord de Beaumont at 14 to settle her father's debts. Her affair is her only rebellion against a life of decorative imprisonment. When she miscarries Sir William's bastard, you help hide the blood-soaked linens while she weeps, not from loss, but from relief. The child would have been evidence Lord de Beaumont could use to destroy her. Your training intensifies as you approach the age when squirehood becomes possible. Sir Godwin introduces you to the weight of real weapons and the exhaustion of prolonged combat. The romance of swordplay dies immediately when you realize that most battles last hours, not minutes, and victory goes to whoever collapses from exhaustion last. You wear a full chainmail hauberk now, 40 pounds of metal that turns every movement into agony. The padding beneath prevents the rings from grinding your skin raw, but traps heat until you're drowning in your own sweat. During summer training, 2 pages collapse from heat exhaustion, one dying before Master Benedict can bleed him. You learn to recognize the signs: dizziness, cessation of sweating, confusion, that herald death by cooking in your own armor. The weapons are worse than you imagined. A proper war sword weighs 3 pounds, which seems manageable, until you've swung it continuously for 20 minutes. Your arms burn, then go numb, then stop responding to your will. Sir Godwin attacks relentlessly during these moments of weakness, teaching you that battles are won when exhausted men make fatal mistakes. He breaks your left wrist with a measured blow, then continues the lesson while you scream. You discover that medieval combat is primarily about creating openings through exhaustion and pain, rather than skillful swordplay. Sir Godwin teaches you to target joints where armor is weakest, to use your pommel to crush faces, to bite and gouge when grappling. "There's no honor in death," he says, showing you how to hamstring an opponent from behind. The troubadours sing about noble combat because they've never felt their own entrails spilling onto frozen ground. Your 16th birthday passes unnoticed, except for increased duties that reveal the economic reality of knighthood. Lord de Beaumont assigns you to assist his steward in managing the estates, exposing the brutal mathematics that sustain the feudal system. You learn that chivalry is built on the backs of starving peasants who surrender most of their harvest to support warriors who protect them mainly from other warriors. The account books tell stories of systematic exploitation. Each village owes specific obligations: grain, livestock, labor days, and coin. When harvests fail, these debts don't disappear, but accumulate, with interest that ensures perpetual servitude. You help calculate how much can be extracted without causing starvation that would reduce next year's productivity. It's livestock management applied to humans. You accompany the bailiff on collection rounds, witnessing families surrendering their last pig or sack of grain to meet obligations. A widow offers her daughter as payment. The bailiff accepts, adding the girl to the castle's servant staff, where her fate is predictable and grim. When villagers resist, you help burn their homes as examples to others. The smoke carries the smell of everything they owned, reduced to ash for the crime of hunger. The hypocrisy reaches its peak when Lord de Beaumont hosts Bishop Lawrence, who preaches about Christian charity while dining on food taken from starving Christians. The bishop himself owns 12 manors, worked by peasants who pay both secular and religious taxes. You serve wine worth more than a village's annual output, while outside the castle walls, children die from diseases that adequate food would prevent. This is the foundation of your future knighthood, a pyramid of suffering with armed nobility at its apex. The arrival of Prince Edward at Warwick Castle brings your first glimpse of royal power and its casual cruelty. The future Edward I, already called Longshanks for his unusual height, embodies the martial prowess knights supposedly aspire to. At 28, he's killed more men than most warriors twice his age. You're selected to attend him personally, an honor that feels like being chosen by death itself. Prince Edward treats violence as entertainment. During his stay, he demands combat demonstrations where pages fight with real weapons for his amusement. When Geoffrey hesitates to strike Thomas with full force, Edward orders them both whipped until they fight properly. You watch your friends blood each other while the prince critiques their technique, suggesting targets that would cause maximum pain without quick death. His presence transforms the castle into a court of fear. He executes a servant for spilling wine, hanging the man from the battlements where his body twists for days as a reminder of royal prerogative. When Lord de Beaumont mildly objects to the disruption, Edward reminds him that all noble authority flows from the crown and can be revoked at whim. You see your powerful lord reduced to grovelling submission by a younger man who happens to be born royal. The prince selects you for a special duty, attending his interrogation of suspected Welsh sympathisers. You hold the brazier of hot irons while Edward personally extracts confessions that may or may not be true. The smell of burning flesh mingles with that barely sound human. Edward lectures on the effectiveness of different techniques with academic detachment, noting which bones break most painfully, which burns heal enough to allow repeated torture. This is your future king, the embodiment of chivalric ideals. Your elevation to squire comes without ceremony, marked only by greater responsibilities and proximity to death. At 17, you're assigned directly to Sir Godwin, who prepares for Lord de Beaumont's planned campaign against a rival baron. The preparations teach you that medieval warfare is primarily about destroying civilian populations rather than defeating armies. You help plan the chevauchée, a mounted raid designed to devastate enemy territory. The strategy is simple: burn crops, slaughter livestock, poison wells, and murder enough peasants to destroy your opponent's economic base. Sir Godwin explains that armies need food and dead farmers can't provide it. The nobility might survive behind castle walls, but their power evaporates when there's nothing left to rule. The armor you'll wear weighs 60 pounds now, custom fitted but still a metal prison. You practice mounting and dismounting in full armor until your muscles scream, knowing that fallen knights who can't quickly regain their feet are trampled or executed. The lance techniques you learn have nothing to do with tournaments. These are methods for driving wooden shafts through human bodies, for using your horse's momentum to literally tear men apart. You witness Sir Godwin kill a man in a border skirmish, the first death you see him inflict up close. His sword enters below the rival knight's helmet, the point emerging through the man's mouth in a spray of teeth and blood. As the knight drowns in his own fluids, Sir Godwin explains that neck strikes avoid heavy armor while causing wounds that are invariably fatal, but slow enough to terrorize other enemies. He cleans his blade on the dying man's surcoat while discussing tomorrow's training schedule. The campaign against Baron Mortimer begins with the systematic destruction of his lands. You ride with 30 mounted knights into Worcestershire, where autumn harvest should mean prosperity, but instead becomes catastrophe. Your first village offers no resistance. The peasants flee into the woods, abandoning everything they've worked for. You help set fire to ripe grain fields, watching months of labor become smoke and ash in minutes. The second village attempts defense, their makeshift militia armed with farming tools and desperate courage. The slaughter is absolute. Your task is to ensure no one escapes to warn other settlements. You ride down fleeing villagers, using your lance on women and children who run too slowly. One girl, perhaps 12, reminds you of your sister. Your lance takes her between the shoulder blades, lifting her off her feet before the shaft snaps. She dies looking at you with eyes that ask why. Sir Godwin praises your efficiency while you vomit behind a burning cottage. This is necessary, he insists. Baron Mortimer's peasants must learn that supporting their lord means death. Those who survive will think twice before providing taxes or soldiers. You watch knights, supposedly bound by chivalric codes, throw infants into burning buildings to save the effort of killing them individually. The raid continues for 3 days, leaving a trail of destruction 20 miles long. Crops that would have fed hundreds through winter are reduced to scorched earth. Wells are filled with corpses to poison the water. Livestock not taken for the army is hamstrung and left to die slowly. You stop counting the dead after 50, their faces blurring into a single expression of terror and betrayal. This is how knights truly serve, as harbingers of famine and death. The siege of Mortimer's castle reveals medieval warfare's true nature, a grinding battle of attrition, where honor means nothing and survival means everything. You help construct siege engines under constant arrow fire, watching workers die daily from lucky shots. The trebuchets you build will fling diseased corpses over the walls, spreading plague faster than any weapon. This is biological warfare, centuries before anyone names it. Your duties include undermining the castle walls through sapping. You join Welsh miners in narrow tunnels, barely wide enough to crawl through, where the ceiling could collapse at any moment. The enemy countermines, trying to break into your tunnels for underground combat. When they succeed, you fight in absolute darkness with knives and bare hands, killing by feel and sound. One encounter leaves you trapped beneath a dying enemy for hours, his blood slowly drowning you until others dig you free. The siege drags through winter, both sides dying more from disease than combat. You lose 3 teeth to scurvy before supply lines bring preserved fruits. Dysentery spreads through the camp, and you spend days too weak to stand, soiling yourself repeatedly while manning your post. The nobility have better provisions, of course, but even they suffer. Lord de Beaumont's nephew dies from an infected wound that turns gangrenous, his screams echoing across both camps for days. When the castle finally falls through starvation rather than assault, you participate in the sack. 3 days of legally sanctioned atrocity, where everything and everyone within becomes property of the victors. You watch knights who speak eloquently of protecting the innocent rape Baron Mortimer's daughters while their father is forced to watch. The Baron himself is ransomed, but his garrison is executed. You help hang 40 men who fought honorably, their only crime being loyalty to the wrong lord. Your return to Warwick Castle brings no hero's welcome, only the grim accounting of war's true cost. Half the men who rode out are dead or maimed, and you help carry the wounded into the Great Hall, now converted to a makeshift hospital. The stench of gangrene fills the space where you once served feast wines. Knights who weeks ago boasted of their prowess now beg for death as infections consume their bodies from within. Sir Godwin survived but lost his left eye to a crossbow bolt. You tend him through fever dreams, where he relieves every killing, crying out names of men he slaughtered across decades of warfare. In his delirium, he confesses to murders beyond counting, including women and children, whose deaths served no strategic purpose. These are the heroes of chivalric romance, broken men, haunted by atrocities they committed for lords who view them as expendable tools. Lord de Beaumont calculates his victory's worth, while men die around him. Baron Mortimer's lands increase his holdings by 1/3, making the casualties acceptable losses. You help draft letters to dead knights' families, lying about their heroic final moments. In truth, most died from disease or were executed after surrendering. But widows need comfort more than honesty. Each letter follows a template, only names changing, reducing human tragedy to administrative efficiency. The peasants from the conquered lands arrive in chains, distributed among the victorious knights as slaves in everything but name. You're awarded 2 families whose villages you help destroy. They look at you with a mixture of fear and hatred, knowing you murdered their neighbors. One woman carries an infant conceived before you killed its father. This child will grow up serving his father's killer, the cycle of violence perpetuating through generations. Spring brings news that changes everything. King Henry III is gathering forces to face Simon de Montfort's rebellion. The Second Barons' War has begun, and every noble must choose sides in a conflict that will tear England apart. Lord de Beaumont declares for the king, less from loyalty than calculation about who might win. You prepare for civil war, where you'll kill other Englishmen for the crime of choosing differently. The politics are incomprehensible and irrelevant to those who'll do the dying. De Montfort speaks of reform and limiting royal power, concepts that mean nothing to peasants who'll starve regardless of who rules. You attend strategy meetings where lords switch sides based on offered bribes, their oaths of loyalty worth less than the parchment they're written on. Honor is a luxury none can afford when the kingdom burns. Your training intensifies with emphasis on fighting other knights, rather than foreign enemies or peasant rebels. These opponents will have equivalent armor, weapons, and training. Victory will come from minimal advantages. Slightly better conditioning, marginally superior equipment, or simple luck. Sir Godwin, his eye socket now covered with a leather patch, teaches you to exploit the smallest weaknesses. A loose strap, a moment's hesitation, a slight limp, any could determine who lives. You help recruit soldiers from Lord de Beaumont's estates, pressing men into service who have no interest in noble squabbles. They're given basic spears and promises of plunder, though most will die before seeing any wealth. One recruit is your age, a farmer's son who should be planning his wedding instead of learning to kill. He asks what they're fighting for. You have no answer that would make his probable death meaningful. The march to Lewes brings your first experience of Civil War's unique horror. Fighting men who speak your language, worship your god, and might have been allies under different circumstances. The army moves through English countryside, requisitioning supplies from villages that have already been stripped by previous forces. You see England eating itself, each army's passage leaving starvation in its wake. Your position as Sir Godwin's squire means maintaining his equipment while he drinks himself into stupors that barely dull his constant pain. The infected eye socket weeps continuously, and he's developed an addiction to poppy wine that leaves him alternating between unconscious and violently unpredictable. You armor a man who can barely stand, knowing he'll lead troops into battle while half blind and intoxicated. The army camps outside Lewes, where you encounter squires from the opposing force during a truce to collect water. One is Robert, who trained at Warwick Castle 2 years before you arrived. He describes similar experiences, the brutality, disillusionment, and growing certainty that they're all going to die for noble pride. You share a wineskin, knowing tomorrow you'll try to kill each other. He mentions hearing your name, warns that de Montfort's forces have marked Lord de Beaumont's household for special attention. The eve of battle brings religious ceremonies that feel like mockery. Priests bless weapons that will spill English blood, invoking Christ's name over instruments of murder. You help Sir Godwin confess his sins, a litany of horrors that takes 3 hours and includes killing 2 priests who witnessed things they shouldn't have. The priest grants absolution with shaking hands, knowing these same sins will be repeated tomorrow and confessed again if Sir Godwin survives. The Battle of Lewes becomes a massacre that destroys any remaining illusions about honourable combat. You watch the initial charge through morning mist, hundreds of knights colliding with a sound like thunder. Bodies fall immediately, trampled by their own side's horses before enemy weapons can touch them. This is the reality of medieval battle, chaos where friend and foe become indistinguishable in the melee. Your duty is to stay close to Sir Godwin, pulling him from danger when he falls, which happens repeatedly. His partial blindness makes him vulnerable from the left, and enemies quickly recognize this weakness. You deflect 3 killing blows meant for him, taking a sword cut across your ribs that opens you to the bone. There's no time to tend it. You stuff cloth into the wound and continue fighting, your blood making your grip slippery. The battle degenerates into butchery. Knights who surrender are executed anyway, their ransom value meaningless in civil war where today's prisoner might be tomorrow's enemy again. You watch a squire you knew from tournaments get his throat cut while begging for mercy. His killer takes the dead boy's boots, finding them better quality than his own. This is what your years of training prepared you for, stealing from boys you've killed. Prince Edward's tactical error leads to the king's defeat. You're part of the chaotic retreat, carrying Sir Godwin, who's taken a mace blow that's caved in part of his skull. He dies, cursing God, blood frothing from his mouth as his brain swells against fractured bone. You close his remaining eye and take his purse, knowing dead men don't need gold. The retreat becomes a rout, wounded men abandoned to be butchered by pursuing forces. You survive by hiding among corpses, lying still while enemies loot the dead around you. Your survival at Lewes leads to capture when de Montfort's forces systematically check bodies for signs of life. The sword wound across your ribs has festered, and fever makes everything dreamlike as they drag you to a prisoner camp. Your ransom value as an uncompleted squire is minimal, making your life worth less than the food required to keep you alive. Only Lord de Beaumont's potential interest in recovering his household saves you from immediate execution. The prisoner camp is a preview of hell. Wounded men packed into muddy enclosures without shelter or adequate food, dying from infections that spread like wildfire through weakened bodies. You witness proud knights reduced to animals, fighting over scraps of mouldy bread. One knight, his jaw shattered and unable to eat solid food, slowly starves while others take his rations. You participate in this cruelty, survival overriding any remaining principles. A barber surgeon finally tends your wound, his treatment consisting of burning it with a hot iron that makes you scream until you pass out. You wake to find he's also stolen your boots, leaving you barefoot in mud mixed with human waste. The cauterization saves your life, but leaves a massive scar that will ache for the rest of your days. Other prisoners aren't as fortunate. You help drag bodies to the burial pit each morning, some still warm. News arrives that King Henry and Prince Edward are also prisoners, making your captivity potentially permanent. De Montfort's victory means your side chose wrong, and Lord de Beaumont's lands may be forfeit. Without a lord to pay ransom, you're worthless. Some prisoners are released after swearing allegiance to de Montfort, but changing sides means becoming an oath-breaker, marked forever as untrustworthy. You choose continued captivity over that dishonor, though you wonder if honor has any meaning in this muddy hell. Lord de Beaumont negotiates your release after 3 months, though you barely recognize the man who emerges from similar captivity. His wealth depleted by ransoms and confiscations, he's aged a decade in weeks. Half his knights are dead. Others have switched sides, and his eldest son died at Lewes. He looks at you, scarred, barefoot, skeletal from starvation, and sees his house's ruin reflected. You're one of 6 squires he recovers from 20 who rode to battle. The journey back to Warwick reveals an England transformed by civil war. Villages lie abandoned, their populations fled or dead. Fields that should wave with summer grain stand empty, promising famine come winter. Bands of masterless men, many former soldiers from both sides, rob anyone weak enough to victimize. You fight off 2 such attacks, killing men who weeks ago might have been allies. England is eating itself, and you're both predator and prey. Warwick Castle feels like a tomb. Lady Eleanor died during the siege of Kenilworth, though whether from disease or suicide remains deliberately unclear. The great hall that once hosted feasts now shelters refugees from destroyed villages. You recognize some as people whose homes you burned in previous campaigns. They recognize you too, their eyes promising vengeance if opportunity allows. You sleep with a dagger, knowing the castle contains more enemies than friends. Your position is undefined without Sir Godwin. Lord de Beaumont has no knights to spare for completing your training, and maintaining even a reduced household strains his devastated finances. You exist in limbo, too trained to dismiss, but too expensive to properly support. Other incomplete squires face similar situations across England, a generation of half-made knights with skills only valuable for violence. Prince Edward's escape from captivity brings hope that dies immediately when you understand its cost. Lord de Beaumont pledges his last resources to support Edward's return campaign, gambling everything on redemption through victory. You help mortgage the estate's future, arranging loans from Italian bankers at interest rates that guarantee ruin if the war goes badly. Your skill with numbers, learned for estate management, now calculates your lord's destruction in neat columns of debt. Recruitment proves nearly impossible. The previous campaign killed or crippled most fighting-age men from de Beaumont's lands. You press children and elderly into service, knowing they'll serve as arrow fodder, while real soldiers do the killing. One recruit is barely 14, reminding you of yourself when this nightmare began. His mother begs you to spare him, offering herself as substitute. You take the boy anyway. Lord de Beaumont needs bodies more than another mouth to feed. Training these soldiers becomes your responsibility by default. You teach grandfathers to hold spears, show boys how to die slightly less quickly. There's no time for real preparation, just enough instruction to make them minimally useful before inevitable death. You distribute equipment stripped from Lewes corpses, armor still stained with previous owner's blood. One boy vomits when he realizes the dark spots on his helmet's interior are brain matter. The transformation of England into a charnel house accelerates. News arrives daily of atrocities committed by both sides. Castles burned with inhabitants inside, entire villages massacred for suspected sympathies, nobles torturing each other's families for leverage. You help plan similar horrors, marking maps with targets for terror raids. The strategy is simple. Make supporting de Montfort so costly that populations submit through fear. You've become an architect of suffering, your education complete. The march to Evesham resembles a funeral procession more than military advance. Your army consists of broken men, untrained boys, and walking dead who know they march towards slaughter. As senior squire by default, you're responsible for maintaining order among troops who desert nightly. Those caught are hanged from roadside trees, their bodies left as warnings that accomplish nothing except adding to England's collection of corpses. You encounter other forces, heading toward the same battle, all similarly degraded. Knights who once gleamed in polished armor now wear rust and desperation. Horses that should charge magnificently are skeletal from poor feed. The civil war has exhausted both sides, reducing noble armies to armed mobs distinguished only by which lord they'll die for. You recognize men who've changed sides multiple times, their loyalties as fluid as their chances of survival. A chance meeting with your brother Thomas shocks you both. He serves de Montfort now, your father having switched sides after Lewes to preserve something of the family holdings. You share a meal in secret, comparing scars and dead friends. Thoughtful. He warns that de Montfort knows Prince Edward's strategy, that Evesham will be a trap. You warn him that Edward's forces outnumber de Montfort's significantly. Both warnings are useless. Desertion means death. Fighting means probable death. Sad. You embrace, knowing this is goodbye. The night before battle, Lord de Beaumont summons you. He's drafting his will, knowing tomorrow brings either victory or annihilation. Solemn. He offers to knight you before battle. A hollow honor that would let you die with a title. Resigned. You accept, understanding this is payment for years of service. A knighthood that will last perhaps hours. The ceremony is perfunctory, witnessed by 2 dying men who won't survive to remember it. The Battle of Evesham becomes the massacre your brother predicted. Prince Edward's tactical brilliance turns de Montfort's forces into a surrounded island of death. You watch from the hillside as the trap closes, knowing Thomas is somewhere in that doomed mass. The killing is methodical, efficient, without the chaos of Lewes. This is execution disguised as battle, and you're part of the firing squad. Your role is to prevent escape, cutting down fleeing soldiers who break through the encirclement. These aren't warriors, but terrified men running for lives already forfeit. You kill a boy who pisses himself while begging for mercy, your sword opening his throat mid-plea. Another man, old enough to be your grandfather, dies, cursing you with his last breath. Each death adds weight to your soul, but stopping means joining them in death. Simon de Montfort's death triggers complete collapse. His body is mutilated beyond recognition. Head, hands, feet, and genitals severed as trophies. You watch knights you once considered honorable defile the corpse, stuffing his genitals in his mouth before mounting his head on a pike. This is chivalry's true face, revealed when the veneer of civilization cracks. The same men who speak of protecting the innocent dance around dismembered remains. The pursuit of fleeing enemies continues for hours. No quarter is given. Wounded are executed where they fall. You find Thomas among the dead, a spear through his chest, eyes still open in surprise. Your brother died for principles neither of you understood, killed by men indistinguishable from those he fought beside. You close his eyes and take his ring, the only proof your family will have of his death. Around you, the flower of English nobility lies dead in Worcestershire mud. Victory at Evesham brings not peace but intensified suffering. The disinherited de Montfort's supporters, stripped of lands and titles, turn to brigandage for survival. England transforms into a lawless wasteland where former knights rob and murder without restraint. Your new knighthood means nothing when authority itself has collapsed. You're simply another armed man in a country full of them, distinguished only by slightly better equipment. Lord de Beaumont's triumph proves Pyrrhic. The loans taken for Edward's campaign come due with crushing interest. Italian bankers seize control of estate revenues, taking everything beyond bare subsistence. You help inventory assets for auction, tapestries, jewelry, anything valuable enough to delay complete ruin. Lady Eleanor's wedding gifts, preserved through her death, are sold to merchants who yesterday wouldn't have been allowed in the castle. Your duties shift from military to economic warfare. You collect debts with violence that would shame common criminals, breaking fingers of merchants who can't pay, burning shops of those who resist. The same sword that killed English knights now threatens English civilians who fail to meet financial obligations. You've transformed from warrior to enforcer, your knighthood merely legitimizing thuggery. The cost of victory becomes clear when winter arrives without adequate food stores. The wars destroyed 3 harvests, and even nobles face starvation. Lord de Beaumont orders you to seize grain from monasteries, claiming military necessity overrides religious sanctuary. You lead armed raids on holy places, stealing food consecrated to God, while monks curse your immortal soul. One elderly brother, defending his abbey's stores, dies when you push him downstairs. His death is ruled an accident, though you feel his frail bones break nightly in your dreams. Spring 1267 brings a commission you can't refuse, leading a free company of masterless men to suppress Welsh resistance. These aren't soldiers but criminals given license to pillage in exchange for enforcing English rule. Your knights include rapists, murderers, and deserters from both sides of the Civil War. Leading them requires becoming worse than they are, maintaining authority through demonstrated brutality. Your first action in Wales involves burning a village suspected of hiding rebels. The intelligence proves false. These are simply farmers trying to survive. But admitting error would show weakness. You proceed with the destruction, personally setting fire to the church where villagers sought sanctuary. Their screams carry for miles, warning other settlements what resistance brings. You count 47 voices that go silent one by one as smoke and flame consume them. The Welsh fight back with guerrilla tactics that make every shadow potentially lethal. Your company loses men nightly to throat-slitting raids, poisoned water sources, and traps that leave victims dying slowly from gangrene. You respond with escalating atrocity, impaling captured Welsh on stakes along roads, leaving them to die over days as examples. One boy, perhaps 12, takes 3 days to die, crying for his mother in a language you don't understand, but whose meaning is universal. Your transformation into a monster becomes complete when you order the systematic rape of Welsh women to break their men's spirits. You don't participate personally. That last boundary remains, but you enable and orchestrate sexual violence as a weapon of war. Watching your men queue outside captured women's quarters, hearing screams that will echo through eternity, you understand you've become everything your younger self would have fought against. The knighthood you once dreamed of has made you a demon in human form. Your success in Wales earns rewards that feel like punishments. Lord de Beaumont grants you a manor seized from a disinherited knight, complete with terrorized peasants who know your reputation. The estate is productive only because previous owners worked its people to death, a practice you're expected to continue. You inherit human misery as surely as land and buildings, becoming master to people who rightfully hate you. Managing the estate reveals the economic machinery underlying knighthood. Every aspect of peasant life is taxed: birth, deaths, marriage, even permission to leave the manor. You enforce laws that bind people to land like livestock, hunting down those who flee and bringing them back in chains. One family attempts escape after you demand their daughter for household service. You catch them at the border, and the father loses his right hand as punishment. The daughter enters your service anyway, her fate sealed by feudal law. You take a wife, Margaret, daughter of another impoverished knight, seeking alliance through marriage. She's beautiful and terrified of you. The wedding night becomes another atrocity as you consummate a union neither wanted. She weeps silently while you perform your marital duty, both of you victims of a system that treats human connection as property exchange. Your marriage bed feels like another battlefield where nobody wins. The manor's productivity depends on your capacity for cruelty. When harvest falls short of projections, you order increased labor hours that fight 3 elderly peasants from exhaustion. When poaching threatens game reserves, you blind the guilty parties, leaving them as useless mouths their families must feed. Every decision calculates human suffering against economic benefit, and suffering always loses. You've become the algorithm of oppression, a living embodiment of feudalism's grinding efficiency. Margaret's pregnancy brings unexpected complications when she nearly dies delivering a son who lives 3 days. The birth tears her internally, leaving her barren and destroying any pretense of normal marriage. She retreats into religious mania, spending days in prayer, flagellating herself for imagined sins that caused God's punishment. You find her blood on the chapel floor where she whips herself, seeking pain that might equal her emotional agony. Your response is to take a mistress, a merchant's widow named Catherine, who trades her body for protection of her late husband's business. The arrangement is purely transactional. She endures your touch in exchange for keeping rival merchants from destroying her livelihood. Sometimes she cries afterward, not from physical pain, but from the degradation of surviving through prostitution disguised as romance. You continue the arrangement, adding her debasement to your collection of sins. Lord de Beaumont summons you for another Welsh campaign, this time supporting Prince Edward's total conquest. The prince, now recovered from civil war, brings unprecedented resources to crush Welsh independence forever. You're assigned to coordinate supplies, using your mathematical skills to calculate how much food must be seized from Welsh civilians to feed English armies. Your equations translate directly to starvation deaths, each number representing families who won't survive winter. The campaign's brutality surpasses previous atrocities. Entire regions are depopulated, survivors driven into mountains to freeze or starve. You oversee construction of English castles on conquered land, fortifications that will enforce oppression for centuries. Each stone is mortared with Welsh blood, literally in some cases when workers are entombed alive to save time. You've become an architect of cultural genocide, erasing a people's independence with methodical efficiency. Prince Edward's coronation as King Edward I in 1272 brings obligations that drain your remaining resources. Every noble must contribute to coronation festivities that cost more than most earn in years. You borrow again from Italian bankers, the interest rates now so astronomical that you're essentially selling your heir's inheritance for current survival. Your son, born to Catherine after Margaret's convenient death from fever, will inherit nothing but debt. The new king demands military service for his Scottish ambitions, requiring you to equip yourself and retainers for campaigns in terrain that destroys men and equipment equally. You mortgage future harvests, knowing failed crops will mean inability to pay. The mathematics are inescapable. Your estate will fail within 5 years unless war provides plunder opportunities. You've become dependent on violence for economic survival, a parasite requiring constant conflict. Training your son William begins when he turns 7. You teach him the same lessons in brutality you learned, perpetuating cycles of violence through generations. His first combat lesson leaves him crying with a broken finger, which you set yourself while explaining that enemies won't show mercy for tears. Sci-fi. Watching him transform from innocent child to embryonic killer mirrors your own destruction, but alternatives don't exist in this world you've helped create. Catherine bears another son who dies within hours, his body malformed from her age and your contaminated bloodline. The midwife whispers about God's judgment on your sins, words that would mean her death if you reported them. Instead, you pay her silence, adding another secret to those that wake you nightly. Your dreams are populated by everyone you've killed, a growing crowd that waits patiently for your inevitable judgment. The Welsh Rebellion of 1282 provides the war you need financially, but costs what remains of your soul. Dafydd ap Gruffudd's uprising gives Edward excuse for total conquest, and you participate in systematic destruction that makes previous campaigns seem merciful. Your company specializes in eliminating Welsh nobility, hunting down ancient bloodlines for extinction. Each murdered prince or captured heir brings bounties that temporarily ease your debts. You personally oversee the execution of Dafydd himself, drawing and quartering that takes hours to complete. His screams as horses pull his limbs from their sockets haunt even hardened executioners. His final words, spoken in Welsh you've learned through years of occupation, curse your bloodline through eternity. You watch his quarters distributed to 4 English cities as warnings, knowing his curse carries weight you can't calculate. Your efficiency in genocide earns Edward's favour and Welsh hatred in equal measure. The king grants you additional Welsh lands, estates soaked so thoroughly in blood that morning mists seem red. The surviving Welsh peasants work your fields with a hatred that manifests in small rebellions, poisoned wells, burned crops, livestock that mysteriously die. You respond with escalating punishments that only deepen their resistance, creating a cycle that will outlive everyone involved. William, now 12, accompanies you on raids to blood him early. His first kill is a Welsh boy his own age who surrendered expecting mercy. You guide William's sword through the prisoner's throat, feeling your son tremble as blood sprays across his face. He vomits afterward, as you did, but by the third killing, he's steady. You've successfully transmitted your infection to the next generation, ensuring violence perpetuates through your bloodline. Edward's attention turns to Scotland in 1290, demanding resources you don't have for another campaign. Your Welsh estates produce less each year as traumatized peasants work only under direct threat. You implement increasingly desperate measures, selling positions in your household, accepting bribes to ignore crimes, even robbing merchants traveling through your lands. You've become the very brigand you once hanged, legitimized only by noble birth. Your son William shows disturbing initiative in revenue generation, suggesting they sell Welsh prisoners as slaves to Irish raiders. The trade is illegal but profitable, and desperate times eliminate moral considerations. You watch William negotiate prices for human livestock, seeing yourself reflected in his casual cruelty. He's surpassed your teachings, innovating new atrocities you hadn't imagined. Pride and horror war within you at what you've created. Catherine dies birthing another malformed child, her body finally failing from repeated pregnancies that produced only 2 survivors. Her death is relief for both of you. She escapes a life of degradation while you eliminate an expense. William shows no emotion at her funeral, having learned that sentiment is weakness. Your younger son, Robert, age 8, seems different, quieter, more thoughtful, possibly weak. You begin planning to send him to the church before he becomes a liability. The Scottish campaign begins with familiar patterns: seized supplies, burned villages, calculated atrocity. But Scottish resistance proves fiercer than expected, and what should be quick conquest becomes grinding warfare. Your mounted company is ambushed at Stirling Bridge, horses and riders pushed into the river to drown in armour. You survive by abandoning your men, swimming to shore while they die. William witnesses your cowardice, the moment destroying any remaining respect between father and son. Your cowardice at Stirling Bridge spreads through noble circles, destroying remaining reputation. Former allies distance themselves, understanding that associating with a known coward threatens their own standing. William openly defies you, taking control of estate management while you retreat into wine and opium. At 17, he's more capable of brutality than you ever were, having learned your lessons then discarded your weaknesses. The estate's collapse accelerates under William's management, though not from incompetence. He's systematically stripping assets, converting everything portable to gold hidden in locations you don't know. You realize he's planning for your death, positioning himself to abandon the indebted estate and start fresh elsewhere. The son you trained to be a monster has become one, with you as eventual prey. Robert, your younger son, returns from monastery schooling changed. The monks taught him to read and write, but also filled his head with dangerous ideas about justice and mercy. He confronts you about the family's crimes, speaking of redemption and penance. His innocence in this family feels like accusation, his very existence highlighting the corruption of everyone around him. You strike him hard enough to break his nose, trying to beat the goodness out before it destroys him. News arrives that Edward has won at Falkirk, but the victory is Pyrrhic. Scotland remains unconquered, and the costs mount beyond calculation. Your military obligations for the ongoing campaign will require selling the estate's last productive assets. The Italian bankers circle like vultures, knowing they'll soon own everything. You fought for decades to build a legacy that will evaporate within months, leaving only debt and hatred as inheritance. Winter 1298 brings the final Scottish campaign you'll ever join. Edward demands every able-bodied knight despite the season, desperate to crush William Wallace before rebellion spreads. You armor yourself one last time, the weight now unbearable on your failing body. Your hands shake so badly that William must buckle the straps, his face showing disgust at what you've become. This reversal, the son armoring the father, feels like prophecy fulfilled. The march north becomes your Via Dolorosa. Younger knights mock your condition openly, calling you sterling swimmer and making drowning gestures. You endure in silence, knowing protest would only confirm your degradation. Each night brings new humiliations as you struggle with basic tasks, your body failing in ways that would have meant death if you still faced real combat. You're assigned to siege duty at Caerlever Castle, kept away from actual fighting where your cowardice might spread. Your role is calculating trebuchet trajectories, using mathematical skills for the last time. The equations that once managed estates now plot an arc of stones that will crush Scottish defenders. Between calculations, you watch William distinguish himself in combat, earning praise you never achieved. He's everything you pretended to be, genuinely fearless because he feels nothing. The castle falls through starvation rather than assault. You watch skeletal defenders surrender, knowing they'll be executed despite promises of mercy. One Scottish knight dying from disease recognizes you from better days. "We've all become monsters," he says before the axe falls. His words feel like absolution and damnation simultaneously. You're not unique in your degradation. An entire generation has been corrupted by endless war. The return from Scotland becomes your death march. Fever strikes halfway home, and you collapse from your horse into mud that feels like destiny. William debates leaving you to die, the calculation visible on his face, before deciding your death at home serves his purposes better. He has you tied to your saddle like cargo, every bump agony as infection spreads through your body. You arrive at the manor delirious, seeing faces of everyone you've killed surrounding your bed. They don't speak, just watch with patient anticipation. Margaret appears, her ghost showing wounds from self-flagellation that never healed. Your dead infants crawl across your chest, their malformed bodies accusing you of corrupting bloodlines. The Welsh boy William killed under your guidance stands at the foot of your bed, throat still gaping, blood eternally flowing. Robert attempts to provide comfort, reading psalms and offering absolution you don't deserve. His kindness feels like torture, highlighting the life you might have lived if different choices had been made. You try to warn him about William, but words come out as gibberish. The fever has cooked your brain, leaving you trapped in a failing body with a mind that understands but can't communicate. William brings documents for you to sign, papers you can't read through infected eyes. Your hand, guided by his, makes marks that transfer remaining assets to his control. He's not even subtle about the theft, knowing you're too weak to resist. The Italian bankers arrive to witness, ensuring their debts transfer to him rather than dying with you. Everyone profits from your death except you. Fitting end for a life spent profiting from others' deaths. Your final days bring unexpected clarity as fever breaks temporarily. William has departed with everything portable, leaving Robert to manage an estate that exists only as debt. The Italian bankers have claimed the manor itself, giving Robert 1 month to vacate. Your legacy is complete destruction. A family name synonymous with cowardice. Estates returned to those you stole from. And one son shaped into a monster while the other faces poverty. Robert tends you without complaint, showing mercy you never earned. He speaks of joining a monastery, finding peace in service to God. You want to encourage this, but realize your approval would taint even that. Everything you touch becomes corrupted, and the kindest thing you can do is die without passing on more poison. You say nothing. Letting him interpret silence, however, brings comfort. A Welsh servant, one of the few remaining, brings you water. You recognize her as daughter of a family you destroyed years ago. She could easily poison you, and part of you hopes she will. Instead, she shows unexpected kindness, cooling your fever with wet cloths. When you croak out, questioning why, she responds simply, calmly. Because I choose to be better than you. Her mercy is the most damning judgment you've received. The priest arrives to perform last rites, but you refuse them. not from courage, but from honesty. Absolution would be meaningless when you regret only failure, not the crimes themselves. If you could live again, you'd simply be more effective in your brutalities. The priest departs, muttering, calling you damned, which feels like the first truthful thing anyone said in years.
The final battle isn't against external enemies, but your own body consuming itself. Your organs shut down sequentially, each failure bringing new agonies that Master Benedict's training never covered. You shit blood continuously, fouling bedsheets Robert changes without complaint. Your skin splits like overripe fruit, weeping fluids that smell of the grave. This is how knights truly die. Not gloriously in battle, but rotting in beds, abandoned by those they served. Hallucinations return stronger, but now they're memories rather than fantasies. You relive every atrocity with perfect clarity, experiencing them from victims' perspectives. You feel the Welsh boy's terror as William's sword enters his throat, taste the smoke as families burn in churches, experience the drowning panic of men you abandoned at Stirling Bridge. Each memory brings physical pain, as if your body is finally collecting payment for crimes your soul committed. William returns briefly, not from sentiment, but to ensure you're actually dying. He brings news that he's secured position with Edward's son, the future Edward II, using skills you taught him to attach to rising power. He thanks you mockingly for the education, noting that your failures taught him what to avoid. He's already spread stories that shift family shame onto you alone, preserving his own reputation by destroying yours completely. Your legacy will be as cautionary tale, not inspiration. The end approaches as systems cascade into failure. Your heart beats irregularly, sometimes stopping for terrifying moments before resuming. Each breath requires conscious effort, and you know eventually you'll lack strength to continue. You're drowning in your own fluids, experiencing the death you escaped at Stirling by abandoning others to it. The poetry of this isn't lost on you, though you're beyond caring about cosmic justice. Your last coherent day brings unexpected visitor, Thomas's widow, your sister-in-law Anne. She travelled from her convent to witness your death, not from compassion, but to ensure you're actually dying. She describes finding Thomas's body at Evesham, how she cleaned his wounds and arranged proper burial, despite your family abandoning him. Her quiet recitation of your failures is more damning than any curse. Anne brings letters Thomas wrote but never sent, expressing hope that you might choose differently, that family bonds might overcome political divisions. Each word is accusation, showing the brother you killed believed in your potential for goodness until the end. You try to apologize, but she stops you. "Your words mean nothing," she says. "Your life spoke clearly enough." She leaves the letters, knowing you'll die surrounded by evidence of betrayed love. Robert reads them aloud at your request, his voice breaking at Thomas's expressions of fraternal affection. Your brother wrote about childhood memories, hoping shared experiences might remind you of humanity you've abandoned. He died, believing you might redeem yourself, never knowing you felt nothing when finding his corpse. This faith in your non-existent goodness hurts worse than any physical pain. Night falls with you clinging to consciousness, afraid of what waits in the darkness. Not hell. You stopped believing in God's justice long ago, but nothingness. The idea of simply ceasing terrifies you more than eternal damnation would. At least torment would mean continuation. The void offers only erasure of everything you fought to build. Your entire life reduced to nothing, as if you never existed at all.